I think it was last year, I did a thought for the week where I told you about one of Karis's favourite shows called Miraculous. And it has a baddie in it called Hawkmoth. And he uses people's emotions to take control of them. If they feel anger or upset, then he can send one of these moth creatures. I mean, I didn't like moths to start with, so this program hasn't helped. And it takes control of them, and he can tell them what to do. And the phrase that is used is that he evilizes them. And in Ephesians 4, verse 26 to 27, Paul says, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity to the devil." You see, emotions can become a foothold for the devil if we're not careful with them. So since then, I've been doing a bit of investigation into kind of emotions and what we see in the Bible. And I just have a few thoughts that I thought I'd share with you. So stereotypically, we think of emotions as coming from the heart. We think about that phrase, follow your head, not your heart. We think about like butterflies in our tummy, or the British Sign Language for emotions or feelings is this, which is nowhere near your head. But actually, science has proved that emotions come from your brain. Apparently 3 areas. I'm in no way medical, so forgive my pronunciation. Barbie might be able to help me. The amygdala, the insular cortex, and this one is good, periaqueductal grey. But there you go. None of them anywhere near the heart. They're all in the head. So if we think back to our Ephesians example, it says that we can be angry, but we need to have control over that anger. So our control comes from our understanding, our thinking, and our mind. And Paul talks about that anger not being used as a way to get revenge, which means we have to choose with our mind to act in or to not act in that way, or to not take that course of action. So we're going to look at the larger section of Ephesians 4, 17 to 27, and it says, "So I tell you this, and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. That, however, is not the way of life you learned when you heard about Christ and were taught in him accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. You were taught, with regard to your former way of life, to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitudes of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbour, for we are all members of one body." And this is the verse that we had earlier. "In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. And do not give the devil a foothold." And I noticed how much the mind is involved in this. It talks about ways of thinking, the attitude of the mind, of being taught and learning. And as we know, science has proved that our emotions come from our mind. So it's our mind that we have to manage. We need to be conscious and in control of the emotions that we feel. And this seems a bit opposite to what we think of. We think of emotions as kind of freedom and expression and not being hemmed in. And I'm not saying that we need to be robots, but just not be at the mercy of our emotions. We need to be able to align our behaviours that spring from our emotions to be those demonstrated by Christ. If we think about Eudia, and again, pronunciation, forgive me, Sintish. Have I said that right, Keith? one of those, in the Philippian church in chapter 4. I feel like, given that not many people can pronounce their name, they're well known. You know, the two women that didn't get along? He entreats them to iron out their differences. So clearly, these two women were letting their frustrations with each other develop into dangerous footholds for the devil, so much so that Paul felt he needed to name them. And there does seem to be a lack of control here. And he also gives a warning about anxiety. And he says, instead, pray, let your minds be focused above. Again, you can feel the anxiety, but just don't be at the mercy of it. And I just want to say that sounds almost a bit flippant here. You know, instead of being anxious, pray. And I don't mean it to sound flippant. Or like it's perhaps an easy thing to do. Pray and then your anxiety is gone. And as someone who has suffered with anxiety, I know that is not something that is necessarily that quick fix. I had counselling a few years ago, and they discovered that I have a tendency to catastrophise. I know Spring Harvest, we arrived home and there was some smoke coming from our tumble dryer. Joel had just put some washing in and had gone back upstairs, leaving said tumble dryer with smoke coming out of it. And luckily, I say luckily, by God's chance, we arrived home in time to stop it from becoming anything more than smoke. And while Steve said, "Oh, that's annoying," in his laid-back way that Steve has, let me just find a new one. I, meanwhile, was sat we had like a car where you could sit on the boot, if that makes sense, thinking about how on earth would I break the news that we'd all died. Because in my mind, that's where it went. I could not get past, well, it's okay. It didn't go wrong. In my mind, that's where I went. And so I have to be very conscious of my thoughts and my thinking to make sure that feeling, those emotions of anxiety don't become overwhelming for me. And I love how the Message puts verses 8 to 9 of Philippians 4. It says, summing it all up, friends, I'd say you'll do best by filling your minds and meditating on things true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious, the best, not the worst, the beautiful, not the ugly, things to praise, not things to curse. And it's not to say that we can't ever be angry. We've seen Jesus angry in the Bible. In Mark 3, Jesus is angry when the Pharisees are questioning him about healing a man on the Sabbath. They were prioritizing rules and legality over compassion. Again, the idea that their emotions were kind of in the wrong place. They weren't feeling the ones that they should have felt at that time. Mark 10, Jesus is angry when the disciples try to push the children away from him. And in John 2, when he's clearing the temple at the start of his ministry, the house of God being used to serve personal gain. And in Matthew 21, in his last week on earth, he does the same. So we can get angry about the right things. And actually, we should get angry about some things. We should get angry if we see injustice. We should get angry if people are being treated wrongly. That's our fuel to want to fight against it. But we can't engage in or prolong an emotion that is essentially going to end up leaving us on our way to sin. We need to make sure that we're not ruled by our emotions, have them in the correct place. It means taking the time to train our minds, because that's where our emotions come from, to allow us to do that. Remember, we're proactively filling our minds with the right things. Philippians 4 being our guide, true, noble, authentic, etc. So we talked about anger, a little about anxiety. I just want to talk a little bit about sadness. John 11 shows us an important moment. Mary and Martha have sent word to Jesus that their brother Lazarus is sick. In verse 5, it says that Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. All three are mentioned by name. This is an individual love that Jesus has for these people. This is a personal relationship that he has with them. But he waits 2 days. This isn't something held him up. This is a deliberate choice to wait 2 days before he heads there. And verse 21, Martha says to Jesus, "Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died." I appreciate I'm putting a bit of a frustrated tone there. I can't help but think she would be a little bit annoyed. And actually, Mary stayed at home, potentially because she's in too much distress to leave the home. But in verse 32, when she does, she also says, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." So these two sisters, in the grief of losing their brother, I think understandably are asking Jesus, "Why didn't you come?" And in verse 33, it says, "When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. 'Where have you laid him?' he asked. 'Come and see, Lord,' they replied. And Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, 'See how he loved him.'" So there's a lot of emotion here. Jesus, clearly upset, he's lost his friend as well, and he's seeing the distress that Mary and Martha are in. Mary and Martha, obviously grief, but as I said earlier, maybe a little bit frustrated, a bit confused, maybe even angry that Jesus didn't come sooner. They both asked that question. But what we also see is the reason why these emotions are not allowed to become a damaging force. What allows these emotions to be kept in their right place. So with Jesus, he knows his power and authority. He says in verse 4, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Whilst he can be upset and he can feel that emotion, he doesn't allow it to overwhelm him, because ultimately he sees the bigger picture. He knows that he's bigger than it. Mary and Martha, although they do experience their grief and distress, actually what they also acknowledge and what surpasses this grief, we see in verse 22. Martha says, "But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." It would be really easy here to say that perhaps she's assuming that Jesus will bring Lazarus back from the dead right there and then. But actually that's not the case, because when Jesus says, "Your brother will rise again," she replies, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." So she doesn't expect Jesus to bring him back to life there and then. She does recognize that the pain and distress and even Lazarus's death is temporary compared to eternity. She's got the bigger picture in her mind. She's not allowed her present distress to spiral out of control and cause her to lose a hold of the security and the hope that she and Lazarus have in Jesus. And this can all sound really easy to say, take control of your emotions, don't let them get on top of you. So I thought I'd share a little testimony. So earlier this year, in February, I had a moment of real panic. It was a bit of a spiral. Steve can attest to this. My emotions absolutely took control. So since last summer, I've had kind of serious psoriasis flare-ups all around my neck. And whilst I'm able to manage it slightly with steroid cream, it was really quite difficult to keep my emotions about it under control. I won't leave these up, but this kind of shows you kind of what I was dealing with. And in February, it did start to spread. You could take it down, that's not nice to look at. In February, just when I thought, do you know what, the steroid cream, it's okay, I can handle this, it started to spread across my eyes. And I won't lie to you, I panicked. I really did panic. And it could be a little bit of vanity, I won't lie. It could have been that. But also, it really was painful. And also, as a teacher in secondary school, some of the kids who are challenging, shall we say, can spot a little weakness and can make a beeline for it. And actually, I did feel at the mercy of this, the mercy of my own emotions surrounding this spread, and what was I going to do? And I had a bit of a tantrum, I did Karis proud, like I really did. I took a bin bag and I went around the house, and I probably threw away some of the things that weren't even mine, but, I was doing things like, and Steve, I think, just let it wash over him, because I was there like, oh, this smells nice, can't even have it, shove it in the bag. I really did, I went to town. Maybe I should have had an Oscar, I don't know. But I was angry, and Steve, I think, during the tantrum just thought, it'll be fine, she'll calm down in a minute. I think he got a little bit nervous when he saw I was buying all of these zero fragrance things online, and suddenly thought, well, I need to nip this in the bud. Because I spent a small fortune on anything that said it was good for eczema, good for psoriasis. I was like, I need a new whole bathroom. But anyway, having had my tantrum and restocked my bathroom, I came to the healing service and I just put myself at the feet of Jesus. I did ask for prayer, but I think what I wanted was more to just have that moment where I was like, look what's happening. Like when, as a kid, you run up to your parents, and you're like, look, I got hurt. And you don't really think that they can fix it there and then, but you just want them to know. And I had that moment. And it would be amazing to say that it's all gone. And it hasn't. It is better. I have a special cream for my eyes, and I won't tell you what it looks like, but its nickname is Snot in a Pot. So that's an odd one to be putting on your eyes when it looks like that and has that consistency. But you know what? It does help. And I am in a better place. I don't feel at the mercy of it. My thoughts about what I needed to remember is what helped get those emotions under control. I needed to remember who is bigger, who actually, if they wanted to, and if it was the right time, they could get rid of it in a second. So I had to have that relearning moment. I had to have that moment where it's like, I know who's bigger, and I'm okay with that. I had to remember that I hadn't been forgotten or abandoned. And this affliction, if I can call it that, doesn't demonstrate a lack of love. Just as Jesus delaying to go to Mary and Martha doesn't demonstrate a lack of love, it just demonstrates the glory of God. That the delay is what caused that massive miracle. That delay was there for a reason. Also, I've been dealing with a burst eardrum since 2023. So if I've ever looked like I ignored you, I didn't. I just didn't hear you. And I was referred to the hospital because they decided that it probably wouldn't heal itself. That probably I would need surgery to fix it. And the appointment at the hospital in November confirmed that. And in April, they said I had to go to get some hearing tests because depending on how much hearing I have left is whether they would operate or not. And as part of that, they had to take pictures of my ear. There's no hole anymore. I still need to have it confirmed on Tuesday by the consultants, but I saw that eardrum and there's no hole. I'd stopped praying for my ear. Actually, the ear had no control over my emotions. I was like, yeah, fine, but I'll deal with it. And actually, my burst eardrum has more impact on my everyday life than my psoriasis does. But I don't have the reaction to it emotionally. And I can't help but think God wanted to make a point. The one that I have my emotions over or in control is the one that God's going to fix. I hope. I don't want to go on Tuesday now and find out there isn't. But you kind of get the point. That one thing that I haven't allowed the emotions to spiral out of control is the one thing that God has said, you can have that now. So, where to land? I wonder if you're in a place where your emotions are spinning out of control or they're running rings around you, don't quite know why. Maybe something's made you angry and you can't get past it. Maybe you can't move on, you feel like you can't forgive them, you feel like you're never going to stop being angry about it. See what Philippians says. Assess your mind, use God's word and hearing from God through prayer to fill your mind with things that are true, noble, gracious, the best. And don't allow the enemy to use your anger as a foothold. Or maybe something else is pulling you into a spiral. You're anxious about something. You're despairing over something. Maybe you're in a process of grief. Hear how Jesus weeps with you and hold you, but also recognize his power over whatever it is that pulled you into that spiral. In the storms of life, be still and calm with him in the boat, because you too know he has power over those storms. They may not be calmed right now. There might be a delay as to why your prayer is not being answered. Whatever it is causing you to spiral might not get fixed right now. It might do, and that's great if it does, but it might not. But just know that you're not forgotten, that you are held, you haven't been abandoned. So in this time, and actually, Aaron was singing a refrain this morning, and I was like, oh, that fits. So I asked him what the song was, and I hope you don't mind me saying, but it's Aaron's song. Aaron wrote this one. And when he told me the rest of the song, I was like, that's it. I want you to play that. So Aaron's going to play it, and I just want to use this time that if you've got something that is spiraling, an emotion that's spiraling, use your mind to hear God. Your mind to remind yourself of the truth that is way bigger than whatever it is that is causing you to spiral. Amen.